The stars had always watched humanity with cold indifference. For 80 years, humans had lived among the galaxy's elder species. Always bowing, always waiting, always hoping that patience would earn them respect. They were wrong. Admiral Minho Park stood in the command center of Earth's orbital station, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the massive display screen. The images coming from New Busan made his blood run cold. Hegemony warships surrounded the colony world like wolves circling wounded prey. Their sleek, silver hulls blocked every escape route, every supply line, every hope. 4 million humans lived on New Busan. Among them were Minho's wife and 2 daughters. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the colony," said a young officer, her voice shaking. "Put it through." The screen flickered. A woman's face appeared, exhausted and afraid. Behind her, Minho could see crowded shelters, children crying, elderly people lying on thin blankets. The woman spoke quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "This is Governor Unji of New Busan. The hegemony has blocked all incoming ships. Our food supplies will last maybe 3 weeks. They're demanding we surrender the colony and accept forced relocation. We have refused. But," she paused, fighting back tears, "we need help. Please, there are children here." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Minho turned to his communications officer. "Send our fastest ship with emergency supplies. Full diplomatic protection codes. Sir, the hegemony has declared the entire sector a restricted zone. Any ship entering will be considered hostile. I don't care what they've declared. Those are our people." The supply ship launched 6 hours later. Minho watched its signal move across the star map, a tiny dot of hope crossing the vast darkness. When it reached the edge of the restricted zone, it transmitted humanity's diplomatic codes and a message of peaceful intent. The hegemony responded with weapons fire. The supply ship exploded in a flash of light. 32 crew members died instantly. Their names would later be added to a memorial wall. But in that moment, they were just a signal that suddenly vanished from Minho's screen. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were hard as stone. "Get me a direct channel to the hegemony command ship." The face that appeared on screen belonged to Warlord Draxon, military commander of the Hegemony Coalition. His species had 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, and skin like cracked gray leather. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Admiral Park, your ship violated our security zone." We responded appropriately. That was a humanitarian vessel. It carried food and medicine. It carried whatever you chose to put in it. "We cannot verify your claims. The security zone remains in effect. Those are civilians down there. Families, children." Draxon's 4 eyes blinked slowly, 1 pair at a time. "They are colonists on a world that rightfully belongs to the hegemony. The humans there will be relocated to more suitable territories. This is not negotiable, and if they refuse, then they will face the consequences of that choice." The transmission ended. Minho stood motionless for a long moment, then turned to his staff. "Contact the Galactic Concord. Request an emergency session." 3 days later, representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Hall of the Concord Station. Minho stood before them, presenting evidence of the blockade, the destroyed supply ship, the suffering colonists. He spoke with controlled passion, appealing to treaties, to laws, to basic decency. The elder species listened. Then they voted. The result was unanimous. The hegemony's actions were declared an internal security matter. No intervention would be authorized. The human representatives' objections were noted and dismissed. As the assembly dispersed, Ambassador Seleth of the Witness Collective approached Minho. The Witness Collective was neutral in all conflicts, observing and recording galactic history without taking sides. Seleth's species had no mouth, communicating through patterns of light that flickered across their translucent skin. "I am sorry, Admiral," Seleth's translator device said. "The Concord has always favored the powerful. Then what good is it? It maintains order, prevents larger conflicts. Order for whom? Not for my people dying on New Busan." Seleth's lights flickered in a pattern that might have been sadness. "I will record this injustice. Future generations will know what happened here. Future generations won't bring back the dead." Minho returned to Earth with nothing. No help. No hope. Just the burning knowledge that the galaxy had turned its back on humanity. 1 week later, the massacre happened. The colonists on New Busan, desperate and starving, attempted to send a distress signal through the blockade. They modified a small communication satellite, hoping to reach any ship that might listen. The signal lasted 12 seconds before hegemony sensors detected it. Warlord Draxon gave the order himself. 3 hegemony warships opened fire on the colony's capital city. Energy beams tore through buildings, streets, homes. The bombardment lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 16,000 humans were dead, including Governor Unji, including Minho's wife, including his daughters. The images spread across every human world within hours. People watched in horror as rescue workers pulled bodies from the rubble. They saw the faces of children who would never grow up, parents who would never see their families again, dreams that had been burned to ash. And something changed. For 80 years, humanity had tried to fit into a galaxy that didn't want them. They had followed rules written by species who saw them as lesser beings. They had accepted insults, restrictions, and discrimination because they believed that peace was worth any price. That belief died in the ruins of New Busan. Admiral Minho Park stood before the United Nations General Assembly 3 days after the massacre. His uniform was crisp and perfect, but his eyes carried a darkness that made even veteran politicians look away. For 80 years, he began, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. We have sought peace. We have compromised. We have accepted our place at the bottom of the galactic order. We have watched our people suffer because we believed that someday, somehow, the galaxy would see our worth. He paused, letting the silence grow heavy. They will never see our worth. They have made that clear. To them, we are nothing. Our lives mean nothing. Our deaths mean nothing. His voice rose, gaining strength, but they are wrong. They believe we are weak because we chose peace. Let them discover what humans become when peace is no longer an option. The assembly erupted in applause that shook the walls. Within hours, orders went out to every human world. Hidden shipyards that had been quietly building warships for decades finally revealed their purpose. Factories shifted to military production. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers, their faces set with grim determination. Captain Yuna Kang received her orders aboard the newly commissioned battleship Ironwill. Commander Tae-Woo Lee began assembling his ghost fleet in the darkness between stars. Dr. Hana Choi accelerated her work on a weapon that would change everything, and across the galaxy, a single transmission arrived at every inhabited world, every station, every ship. It was short and simple. The United Human Alliance declares war on the Hegemony Coalition. We will not stop until justice is done. We will not forget. We will not forgive. The galaxy had wanted humanity to stay quiet and small. Instead, humanity chose to roar. 3 months passed after humanity declared war. The hegemony laughed. High Sovereign Velthos addressed his council with amusement in his ancient voice. His species had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had crushed rebellions from species far older and stronger than humanity. The idea that these young, fragile creatures could challenge the hegemony was simply funny. Let them come, Velthos said, his long fingers tapping the arm of his throne. Our fleets outnumber theirs 50-1. This war will be over before it truly begins. Warlord Draxon was not so confident. He had seen the footage from New Busan. He had watched humans pull survivors from burning buildings with their bare hands, skin blistering from the heat. He had seen them organize relief efforts with terrifying efficiency. There was something in their eyes that made him uneasy. We should strike Earth now, Draxon urged, before they can prepare, and give them a story of heroic defense. No. Let them attack first. Let the galaxy see them break themselves against our walls. Then no species will ever challenge us again. It was a decision Draxon would regret for the rest of his short life. While the hegemony waited, humanity worked. In a hidden shipyard deep inside an asteroid field, Commander Tae-Woo Lee walked along a row of ships that officially did not exist. They were painted black, their hulls covered in a material that absorbed sensor waves like water-absorbing light. Even standing right next to them, they seemed to blur and fade at the edges of vision. 300 ships, said his second-in-command. A woman named Su Jin with scars on her hands from years of combat. All equipped with the new stealth systems. The hegemony has nothing that can detect us. And the crews? Volunteers only. Every single one of them lost someone at New Busan. Taewoo nodded slowly. These would be his ghost fleet. They would strike without warning and vanish without a trace. The hegemony would learn to fear the dark spaces between stars. Begin operations, he ordered. Target their supply lines, fuel depots, communication relays. Make them feel hunted. The ghost fleet spread out like shadows. Within weeks, hegemony convoys began disappearing. Ships would enter a sector and never emerge. Stations would go silent without explanation. Each time, the only evidence was a small beacon left behind, broadcasting a single message. Remember. New Busan. Draxon raged at his commanders, demanding answers. They had none to give. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. Morale in the hegemony military began to crack. Far from the front lines, in a secret research station hidden behind a dying star, Dr. Hana Choi worked without sleep. Project Sunfall had begun as a theoretical exercise, a paper published in an academic journal about the possibility of manipulating stellar energy. The hegemony had dismissed it as fantasy. They were wrong about many things regarding humans. Hana stood before a holographic model of a star, watching simulations run over and over. The principle was simple in theory but terrifyingly complex in practice. If you could create a network of satellites around a star and coordinate their energy output with absolute precision, you could generate a directed pulse of plasma that would travel along a specific vector. Anything in that vector's path would be destroyed. The final calibration tests are complete, said her assistant, a young man named Ji-hoon, whose hands trembled slightly from too much caffeine. It works, Doctor. It actually works. Hana stared at the simulation. A pulse of fire racing from the sun, engulfing everything in its path. She had created a weapon that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. The power of a star, aimed like a rifle. What have we made? She whispered. Something that might save us all. She looked at her reflection in the darkened screen. A tired woman with gray streaks in her hair that had not been there a year ago. Was she a hero or a monster? The answer probably depended on which side you were on. Package everything. I'm taking it to Admiral Park personally. While these preparations continued, Captain Yuna Kang was busy proving that humanity did not need superweapons to win battles. Intelligence reported a hegemony fleet gathering near a system called Vorthan, a staging point for their eventual push toward Earth. 400 warships waited there, preparing for the invasion. Yuna requested permission to attack with 40 ships. Admiral Minho stared at her across the tactical table. You're asking to attack a force 10 times your size. I'm asking to show them that numbers mean nothing if you don't know how to use them. And if you fail, then I die doing something that matters. Better than waiting for them to come to us. Minho studied the young captain. She had the same fire in her eyes that he saw in his mirror every morning. The fire of someone who had lost too much to fear death anymore. Go, but come back alive. We'll need you for what comes next. Yuna's fleet jumped into the Vorthan system at an angle the hegemony thought was impossible. Their ships emerged from hyperspace already firing, targeting the enemy's sensor arrays and communication relays. Within the first minute, half the hegemony fleet was blind and deaf. The battle lasted 3 hours. Yuna commanded from the bridge of the Iron Will, her voice calm and precise, as she directed her ships through formations that seemed almost choreographed. Her pilots had trained for this moment their entire careers. They knew each other's movements without speaking. They flowed like water around the larger, slower hegemony vessels. Focus fire on their flagship, Yuna ordered. All batteries. 40 human ships concentrated their weapons on a single point. The hegemony flagship's shields held for exactly 8 seconds before collapsing. The explosion was visible from 3 systems away. Without their command ship, the remaining hegemony forces panicked. Some tried to retreat. Others fired blindly at targets they could barely see. Yuna's fleet cut through them like a blade through paper. When it was over, humanity had lost 7 ships. The hegemony had lost 212. The report reached every corner of the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humans as weak began to reconsider. Some of them, former subjects of the hegemony who had long suffered under their rule, began sending secret messages to Admiral Minho. They offered intelligence, supplies, safe passage through their territories. The tide was beginning to turn, but Warlord Draxon refused to accept defeat. He stood before High Sovereign Velthos and demanded what no commander had ever requested in hegemony history. Give me every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have. I will take 15,000 warships to Earth and end this rebellion once and for all. Velthos hesitated. Committing such forces would leave the hegemony's own territories vulnerable. But the alternative, admitting that humanity could challenge them, was unthinkable. You will have your fleet, destroy them utterly, leave nothing standing. As the largest armada in galactic history began to assemble, Lieutenant Jisoo Baek sat alone in her fighter cockpit, running through pre-flight checks for the 100th time. She kept a photograph taped to her instrument panel. It showed her younger brother, a bright-eyed boy of 12 who had loved building model spaceships. He had lived on New Busan with their parents. Now he was just a name on a memorial wall. I'm coming, she whispered to the photograph. I promise, I'm coming. Outside her viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. Soon, they would burn with something else entirely. The hegemony armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system on a Tuesday. 15,000 warships emerged from hyperspace in a wave of displaced energy that lit up every sensor in the system. They spread across the void like a plague of metal locusts, blocking out the stars themselves. On Earth, people looked up at the night sky and saw nothing but darkness where there should have been light. They understood what it meant. The enemy had come. Admiral Minho Park stood on the bridge of the command station orbiting Mars, watching the enemy fleet advance. Beside him, a tactical display showed humanity's response. 2,000 ships, arranged in a defensive formation between Mars and Earth. Behind them lay everything humanity had ever built. Every city, every colony, every dream. Sir, incoming transmission from the enemy flagship. Put it through. Warlord Draxon's face appeared on the screen. His 4 eyes gleamed with victory that had not yet been earned. Admiral Park, I offer you one chance to surrender. Order your fleet to stand down. Dismantle your weapons. Accept hegemony governance. Do this, and your species will be allowed to continue existing, under our supervision. And if we refuse, then I will burn Earth until its oceans boil. I will hunt down every human in the galaxy. Your species will become a memory, a cautionary tale told to other species who consider defying us. Minho let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You crossed the stars to break us. You gathered the largest fleet in galactic history because you fear what we might become. You should have stayed home, Warlord, because you will find only your own end here. He cut the transmission. Captain Unikang received the order to begin defensive operations exactly 1 hour later. She stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, her crew working around her in quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment. They had dreamed about it. Now it was here. And there was no more room for fear. All ships, form up on the Iron Will. Combat Formation Delta. We hold the center. 2,000 ships locked into position. Fighter squadrons launched from carrier bays. Weapons systems hummed to life. The fleet hung in space like a wall of steel and defiance. The hegemony attacked in waves. The first wave consisted of 3,000 ships, designed to test humanity's defenses and drain their ammunition. They swept forward in a wide crescent formation, firing from extreme range. Human ships returned fire with precision, each shot calculated to cause maximum damage. Hold the line, Yuna commanded, her voice steady. Make them pay for every kilometer. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships absorbed damage that should have destroyed them, and kept fighting. Pilots ejected from crippled vessels and were rescued by support ships, returning to battle in fresh fighters within minutes. Every crew member knew that retreat meant the death of everyone they loved. By the time the first wave withdrew, humanity had lost 300 ships. The hegemony had lost 800. Draxon stared at the casualty reports in disbelief. They should have broken by now. Their ships are smaller. Their technology is inferior. Why do they keep fighting? None of his officers had an answer. The second wave came 4 hours later, led by Draxon's elite guard. These were veterans of 100 campaigns, commanding ships equipped with the finest weapons the hegemony could build. They drove straight toward the center of humanity's line, aiming for the Iron Will itself. Yuna watched them come. Signal the Ghost Fleet. Tell Commander Tewu it's time. From the darkness behind the hegemony formation, 200 stealth ships suddenly appeared. They had drifted into position during the first battle, silent and invisible, waiting for this moment. Now they opened fire on the enemy's rear, targeting fuel reserves and ammunition stores. The hegemony fleet was caught between two forces. Elite ships that had been driving toward Earth suddenly found themselves surrounded. Explosions blossomed across their formation, like deadly flowers. Commander Tewu Li led the attack personally. His ship, the Silent Knife, cut through enemy lines with terrible precision. His crew worked in perfect coordination, each person knowing exactly what to do without being told. Then everything went wrong. A hegemony cruiser, larger than any Tewu had ever seen, emerged from the chaos. It had been hiding among the fleet, waiting for exactly this opportunity. Its weapons locked onto the Silent Knife before anyone could react. The first shot crippled Tewu's engines. The second destroyed his weapons array. Warning lights filled the bridge as crew members screamed damage reports. "Sir, we can't escape. Should we signal for rescue?" Tewu looked at the tactical display. The hegemony cruiser was moving to join the attack on Earth's defenders. If it reached the main battle, it would tear through human ships like paper. "No rescue," he said quietly. "Set a collision course for that cruiser. Maximum acceleration." "Sir, that's suicide. That's war." The Silent Knife surged forward on its remaining power. The hegemony cruiser tried to evade, but Tewu had predicted its movement. His crippled ship struck the enemy vessel at full speed. The explosion was visible from Mars. Tewu's last transmission reached Admiral Minho 3 seconds before impact. "Tell Yuna, we bought her time. Make it count." The battle continued without pause for morning. Human ships pressed their advantage, pushing the disorganized enemy back. Lieutenant Jisoo Beck led a squadron of fighters through a gap in the hegemony formation, her weapons blazing. "Target that platform," she called to her wingmates. "The big one, with all the sensor arrays." The platform was providing targeting data for half the enemy fleet. Without it, they would be fighting blind. Jisoo dove toward it through a storm of defensive fire. Beams of energy missed her by centimeters. Her fighters' shields flickered and died. She fired everything she had. The platform exploded in a cascade of light. Jisoo's fighter tumbled through the debris, its systems failing one by one. She managed to regain control seconds before she would have crashed into a piece of wreckage. Fighter Wing Delta, return to carrier for repairs. Negative. Command. I'm staying in the fight. Her fighter was held together by luck and stubborn willpower. She kept flying anyway. Warlord Draxon watched the battle turn against him and refused to accept what he was seeing. Half his fleet was damaged or destroyed. Human resistance had not weakened at all. But he still had numbers on his side. He still had options. All remaining ships, form attack position Alpha. We will crush them in a single, overwhelming strike. It was a desperate gamble. Concentrating his forces would create an unstoppable hammer blow. But it would also make them vulnerable. Every ship in one place meant every ship could be hit at once. Draxon did not care. He would destroy humanity or die trying. From Mars Station, Admiral Minho watched the hegemony fleet draw together. 10,000 ships converging into a single massive formation. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Exactly what he had planned for. He opened a channel to Dr. Hana Choi, who waited on a hidden station near the sun. "Doctor, is Sunfall ready?" "Yes, Admiral. But I need you to understand what this means. If we use this weapon, we become something different. We cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. They crossed that line when they murdered our people. Now it's our turn." He paused, looking at the image of Earth on his tactical display. Blue and green and beautiful. Activate the Sunfall Array. Across the solar system, hidden satellites around the sun began to glow. The sun trembled. Dr. Hana Choi stood at the control station of the Sunfall Array. Her hands steady even as her heart raced. Around her, a team of scientists monitored hundreds of displays showing energy levels, trajectory calculations, and timing sequences. Everything had to be perfect. A mistake of even a fraction of a second could destroy their own fleet instead of the enemy. Alignment confirmed, called out Jihoon, his young face pale but determined. All satellites responding. Power levels at 90%. And rising. Wait for full power. We only get one shot at this. Across the solar system, Ambassador Seleth of the Witness Collective watched from their observation vessel. Their species had recorded 10,000 years of galactic history, but they had never seen anything like this. A young species, outnumbered and outgunned, standing against the greatest military force in the galaxy. Seleth activated their broadcast systems. Every inhabited world in the galaxy would see what happened next. Warlord Draxon's fleet completed its formation. 10,000 warships, packed into a dense mass of destruction aimed straight at Earth's defenders. It was the most powerful concentration of military force ever assembled. All ships, Draxon commanded, his voice ringing with triumph. Begin the final attack. Leave nothing alive. The hegemony armada surged forward. On the Sunfall station, a single light turned green. Full power achieved, Hana announced. Array is ready. Admiral Minho's voice came through the communication system. Fire. Hana pressed the activation switch. Nothing visible happened at first. The satellites around the sun were too far away to see, their energy too subtle to detect with normal senses. But deep within the star, something changed. Magnetic fields that had existed for billions of years shifted. Plasma currents that normally flowed in random patterns suddenly aligned. Then the sun pulsed. A wave of pure stellar fire erupted from the star's surface, but not in all directions. The Sunfall array shaped the energy, focused it, aimed it along a precise vector. A spear of plasma traveling at a quarter of the speed of light, aimed directly at the hegemony formation. Draxon had exactly 3 seconds to understand what was happening. His sensors screamed warnings about an incoming energy wave. His navigation officers shouted about impossible readings. His tactical display lit up with the signatures of death approaching. What is that? He demanded. What is that? No one answered. There was no time. The plasma wave struck the hegemony fleet like the fist of an angry god. Ships vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed, simply vanished. Their matter converted to energy in an instant. The dense formation that Draxon had created became his fleet's death sentence. Ships packed together meant more targets in the wave's path. 9,000 warships ceased to exist in less than 2 seconds. The remaining vessels, those at the edges of the formation, survived the initial strike but not unscathed. Their shields were overloaded. Their systems were fried. Their crews were blinded and deafened by the energy that washed over them. On the bridge of his flagship, Draxon pulled himself up from where the shockwave had thrown him. Around him, officers lay unconscious or dead. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Emergency lights flickered in the smoke-filled air. Damage report, he croaked. Sir, we've lost contact with most of the fleet. Sensors are detecting approximately 6,000 surviving ships, but most are heavily damaged. 6,000. He had brought 15,000. The humans, he said slowly, his 4 eyes focusing on the main display. What about the humans? Through the static and interference, an image appeared. The human fleet, battered but intact, was reforming. Their ships moved with purpose and precision, closing the distance to the crippled hegemony survivors. Captain Yunakang's voice cut through every frequency. All ships, forward. Leave none standing. The human fleet attacked. It was not a battle, it was a reckoning. Human ships moved through the damaged hegemony formation like wolves among wounded sheep. They fired with cold efficiency, targeting engines and weapon systems. Some enemy ships tried to fight back, but their crews were still stunned from the Sunfall pulse. Others tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. Lieutenant Jisoo Baek led her squadron through the chaos, her damaged fighter somehow still flying. She saw a hegemony destroyer attempting to turn toward Earth for a suicide run. Her weapons were nearly depleted, but she had enough for one more shot. Not today, she whispered, and pulled the trigger. The destroyer exploded. Jisoo flew through the debris cloud, her fighter's hull scraping against fragments of the ship she had just killed. Warning lights covered her console. She ignored them all. On his crippled flagship, Warlord Draxon watched his fleet die. Ship after ship winked out on his tactical display. The proud armada that had been meant to crush humanity was being torn apart by the very species it had come to destroy. A human ship, the Iron Will, appeared through the smoke of battle. It positioned itself directly in front of Draxon's flagship, its weapons aimed at his bridge. Captain Yuna Kang's face appeared on his screen. "This is Captain Kang of the United Human Alliance. Your fleet is destroyed. Your mission has failed. Do you have any last words before I finish this?" Draxon stared at her. This young woman, from a species his people had dismissed as primitive and weak. This human who had outfought and outthought warriors with 10 times her experience. "This is impossible," he said, his voice hollow. "You are only human." Yuna's eyes hardened. In them, Draxon saw the reflection of burning cities, of children crying, of a species pushed too far and discovering exactly what they were capable of. "Yes," she said. "We are." The Iron Will fired. Draxon's flagship came apart in a blossom of fire and light. The warlord who had ordered the massacre of New Busan died, never understanding how badly he had underestimated his enemy. The Battle of Sol was over. Ambassador Seleth's broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy. Trillions of beings watched the final moments of the hegemony Armada. They saw the human fleet, outnumbered and facing certain destruction, turn the tide through courage and innovation. They saw a species that refused to die. Seleth spoke only 6 words, but they echoed through history. "The humans have won the war." On the observation deck of Mars Station, Admiral Minho Park stood alone, watching the debris field that had once been the greatest military force in existence. Dr. Hana Choi found him there an hour later. "We did it," she said, her voice tired beyond exhaustion. "It's over." "No," Minho replied, his eyes still fixed on the scattered remains of the enemy fleet. "This part is over. But what we've started, what we've become, that's just beginning." Hana stood beside him, following his gaze. "Was it worth it? The weapon we built? The lives we took?" Minho didn't answer. He thought about his wife and daughters, lost on New Busan. He thought about the 16,000 who died in the massacre. He thought about Commander Tae-woo, who gave his life to buy them precious minutes. Then he looked toward Earth. Visible in the distance. Blue oceans. Green continents. Cities lighting up the night side like constellations. Still there. Still whole. Still home. "Ask me again in 100 years, he finally said. "Right now, all I know is that we're still standing, and they're not." Outside, the stars burned on, witnesses to the day everything changed. 1 year passed since the Battle of Seoul. The galaxy was not the same. The hegemony coalition, which had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, collapsed in a matter of months. Without their military, the 12 elder species had nothing to hold their alliance together. Old grudges resurfaced. Oppressed populations rose up against their masters. Borders that had stood for centuries dissolved like sand in water. High Sovereign Velthos, the ancient ruler who had dismissed humanity as insignificant, was deposed by his own council. They blamed him for the disaster, for underestimating the humans, for sending their fleet to die in a battle that should never have been fought. He spent his final days in a prison cell, watching recordings of the Battle of Seoul over and over, trying to understand where everything went wrong. He never did understand. That was perhaps the saddest part. In the power vacuum left by the hegemony's fall, many expected humanity to step forward and claim dominion over the galaxy. They had proven themselves the strongest. They had the weapons. They had the will. The stars were theirs for the taking. Admiral Minho Park chose a different path. He stood before the United Nations General Assembly, the same hall where he had declared war 1 year ago. His uniform bore new medals and new scars. His hair had gone completely gray, but his eyes still held that quiet fire that had carried humanity through the darkness. "We could conquer them," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We could do to them what they tried to do to us. Take their worlds, rule their people. Make them kneel." He paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "But that is not who we are. We did not fight to become them. We fought to prove that there is another way. A way built on cooperation instead of domination, on respect instead of fear, On hope instead of hate, the assembly listened in complete silence. Today, I am announcing the formation of the Stellar Alliance. Any species willing to live in peace, to respect the rights of others, to stand together against tyranny, is welcome to join us. We will not be rulers. We will be partners. We will build something better than what came before. The vote was unanimous. Humanity had chosen mercy over revenge. Within weeks, representatives from dozens of species arrived at Earth to join the new alliance. Many were former hegemony subjects, species that had suffered for centuries under the elder race's rule. They came with hope in their eyes and gratitude in their hearts. Others came out of simple respect. They had watched the humans fight against impossible odds. They had seen them win. And then they had seen them extend a hand in friendship rather than a fist in conquest. It was something new in the galaxy, something worth believing in. Lieutenant Jisoo Baek did not attend the political ceremonies. She had a different journey to make. The transport ship touched down on New Busan on a gray morning, exactly 1 year after the massacre. The colony was being rebuilt, slowly but steadily. New buildings rose where rubble had once stood. Gardens grew in soil that had been scorched by weapons fire. Life continued, as it always did. Jisoo walked through the streets she had known as a child. Everything looked different, and yet somehow the same. The bakery on the corner where her mother used to buy bread, the school where her brother had learned to read, the park where they had played together, before the war, before everything changed. The memorial stood in the center of town. It was a simple structure, a wall of polished black stone bearing the names of everyone who had died. 16,000 names carved into rock, a permanent reminder of what had been lost. Jisoo found her family's names near the bottom of the wall. Her parents, her brother. She reached out and touched the letters, feeling the smooth stone beneath her fingers. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I came back. I wish you could see what we built. I wish you could know that it meant something." Tears rolled down her cheeks. For the first time since the massacre, she allowed herself to grieve. She had been so focused on fighting, on surviving, on revenge, that she had never stopped to feel the weight of her loss. Now it crashed over her like a wave. And she let it come. She stayed at the memorial until sunset. Then she dried her eyes, stood up straight, and walked back to the transport ship. There was still work to do. Still a galaxy to rebuild. Her family would have wanted her to keep going. Captain Yuna Kang, now Admiral Yuna Kang, found her purpose in training the next generation. The war had taught her that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their technology. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, to become something greater than they were. She established a new academy, open to humans and aliens alike. Young beings from across the galaxy came to learn not just how to fight, but how to think, how to solve problems, how to turn impossible situations into victories. A young cadet asked her once, "What made humans win against the hegemony? You were outnumbered. Your ships were smaller. Your technology was less advanced. How did you do it?" Yuna thought about the question for a long time before answering. "We remember," she said finally. "We remember every wrong done to us, and we use that memory as fuel. We adapt, changing our tactics and strategies faster than any enemy can predict. And most importantly, we refuse to die. When every logical calculation says we should surrender, something inside us says no. And that something makes all the difference." Dr. Hana Choi never built another weapon. She dismantled the Sunfall array herself, piece by piece, ensuring that the technology could never be used again. Then she published her research, not as instructions for destruction, but as a warning. "We proved what we could do," she wrote in the introduction. "Now we must prove what we choose not to do. Power without restraint is just another form of tyranny. Let this work stand as evidence that humanity can be trusted with the stars." Ambassador Seleth visited Earth one final time, 5 years after the war. They addressed the Galactic Concord, now dominated by the Stellar Alliance, with a message that would be studied by historians for centuries. "We observed humanity in their darkest hour," Seleth said, their lights flickering with emotion. "We watched them face extinction and refuse to surrender. We watched them achieve victory and refuse to abuse it. They have shown us something we did not think possible. They have shown us that strength and compassion can exist together. Perhaps we were wrong to ever doubt them. Admiral Minho Park lived to see the Stellar Alliance grow from a dream into a reality. He retired from military service at 73, his body finally demanding rest that his spirit had always denied. He spent his final years in a small house on New Busan, tending a garden near the memorial. One afternoon, a young girl wandered up to his fence, curious about the old man with sad eyes and gentle hands. "Were you in the war?" she asked. "Yes." "Were you afraid?" Minho set down his gardening tools and knelt to meet her eyes. She reminded him of his daughters, so long ago, and his heart ached with the memory. "Every day," he said. "Every single day. I was afraid. Afraid of dying. Afraid of losing. Afraid of what I might have to become." "Then how did you keep fighting?" He smiled, and for a moment, the sadness in his eyes lifted. "Because fear is not weakness, little one. Fear is the fire that makes us fight for what we love. And I loved my people very much." The girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood something profound. Then she ran off to play, leaving Minho alone with his memories. He stood up slowly, his old bones creaking, and looked up at the sky. Ships moved among the stars, human and alien alike, working together to build something new. The galaxy that had once tried to crush humanity now looked to them for guidance. They had come so far. They had paid such a terrible price. But standing there in the garden, watching the ships pass overhead, Minho knew it had been worth it. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as victims, as guardians, and the galaxy would never forget what they had witnessed.